As we reflect on Donald Trump's inauguration, several key moments stand out, each carrying its own significance. From the solemn swearing-in ceremony to the inaugural address, every aspect was meticulously planned to convey a message of change and American resurgence. One of the most pivotal moments was Trump's inaugural speech, where he painted a stark picture of American carnage and vowed to transfer power from Washington, D.C., back to the people. This speech set the tone for his presidency, emphasizing themes of nationalism, economic protectionism, and a break from traditional political rhetoric. The presence of former presidents and dignitaries also added layers of meaning to the day. Their attendance signified the continuity and respect for the peaceful transition of power, even amidst deep political divides. The peaceful demonstrations and the Women's March that followed highlighted the active engagement of the public in the political process, showcasing democracy in action. Internationally, the inauguration was watched closely, with allies and adversaries alike parsing Trump's words for clues about future U.S. foreign policy. The mixed reactions from global leaders underscored the uncertainty and anticipation surrounding the new administration. In summary, Trump's inauguration was more than just a ceremony. It was a defining moment that encapsulated the hopes, fears, and divisions of a nation. It set the stage for a presidency that would be characterized by bold promises, contentious policies, and unprecedented public engagement. Gap 2S. Gap 2S. To gain a deeper understanding of the impact of Donald Trump's inauguration, we turn to experts in political science, history, and media studies. Dr. Emily Thompson, a political scientist at Georgetown University, notes that Trump's inauguration marked a significant shift in American political discourse. The rhetoric used in his inaugural address was unprecedented in modern times. It signaled a departure from the more unifying messages of his predecessors and set the stage for a more divisive and populist approach to governance. Historian Dr. Robert Hayes from Harvard University adds, "The historical significance of Trump's inauguration cannot be understated. It was a moment that highlighted the deep political and social divides within the country. The reactions, both positive and negative, were indicative of a nation grappling with its identity and future direction." Media analyst Sarah Johnson points out the role of media coverage in shaping public perception of the inauguration. The extensive media coverage, particularly on social media platforms, amplified the polarized reactions to Trump's presidency. The way the event was portrayed in different media outlets contributed to the widening gap in public opinion. These expert insights help us contextualize the inauguration as not just a historical event, but a catalyst for ongoing political and social change. The varying perspectives highlight the complexity and multifaceted nature of its impact, offering a comprehensive view of how Trump's inauguration continues to influence the American political landscape. Gap 2S. Gap 2S. To fully grasp the significance of Donald Trump's inauguration, it's essential to consider the historical context leading up to that pivotal moment. The 2016 presidential election was one of the most contentious in modern American history. Amidst allegations of foreign interference, widespread misinformation, and deep societal divides, Trump's victory represented a seismic shift in the political landscape. The years preceding the inauguration saw growing discontent among many Americans who felt left behind by globalization and rapid technological changes. This period was marked by a resurgence of populist movements worldwide, with Trump's campaign tapping into similar sentiments of frustration and desire for change. The historical backdrop of economic challenges, cultural shifts, and political polarization set the stage for an inauguration that would not only mark the beginning of a new administration, but also reflect the complexities and tensions of the time. Understanding this context helps us appreciate why Trump's inauguration was more than just a ceremonial event. It was a reflection of a nation at a crossroads, grappling with its past and uncertain about its future. As we continue to examine the impact of Trump's inauguration, keeping this historical context in mind allows us to better understand the profound changes it heralded and the lasting effects on American society and politics. Gap 2S. Gap 2S. One of the most notable aspects of Donald Trump's inauguration was the unprecedented security measures implemented to ensure the safety of the event. Given the heightened tensions and polarized atmosphere following the 2016 election, authorities took no chances. Washington, D.C. was transformed into a virtual fortress, with thousands of law enforcement officers, National Guard troops, and Secret Service agents deployed across the city. Gap 1S, security perimeters were established, and numerous checkpoints were set up to screen attendees. The National Mall, where the inauguration took place, saw the presence of bomb-sniffing dogs, surveillance drones, and even snipers positioned on rooftops. Streets were closed and large areas were cordoned off to prevent any potential threats. Gap 1S, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, and the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, worked around the clock to monitor and mitigate any possible risks. Intelligence agencies kept a close eye on both domestic and international threats, ensuring that any suspicious activity was swiftly addressed. Gap 1S, the heightened security was a reflection of the times, underscoring the deep divisions and fears that permeated the political landscape. While some criticized the measures as excessive, others saw them as a necessary precaution to safeguard the democratic process and ensure a peaceful transition of power. Gap 1S. These extraordinary security efforts underscored the gravity of the occasion, and the lengths to which authorities were willing to go to protect one of the nation's most significant democratic traditions. As we reflect on the inauguration, it's crucial to recognize the meticulous planning and extensive resources that went into ensuring its security, highlighting the challenges and complexities of holding such an event in a deeply divided nation. Gap 2S. Gap 2S. To gain a deeper understanding of the atmosphere and sentiments surrounding Donald Trump's inauguration, we spoke with several attendees who were present on that historic day. Gap 1S. Their perspectives offer a unique glimpse into the diverse reactions, hopes, and concerns that marked the event. Gap 1S. Interviewee 1. It was an incredible experience to be here. Gap 1S. Despite the heavy security, there was a sense of excitement and anticipation. Gap 1S. I came because I believe in what President Trump stands for, and I wanted to witness this moment firsthand. Gap 1S. Interviewee 2. I had mixed feelings. Gap 1S. On one hand, it's a powerful moment in our democracy, Gap 1S, but on the other, I'm worried about the direction our country might be heading. Gap 1S. The security presence was overwhelming, Gap 1S, but it was a necessary measure given the circumstances. Gap 1S. Interviewee 3. As someone who didn't vote for Trump, Gap 1S, I was here to protest peacefully. Gap 1S. The atmosphere was tense, Gap 1S, but it was important for me to make my voice heard. Gap 1S. The security was intimidating, Gap 1S, but it didn't deter me from expressing my concerns. Gap 1S. Interviewee 4. I brought my kids because I wanted them to see this part of our democratic process. Gap 1S. Regardless of who they support, Gap 1S. It was a teaching moment about civics and the importance of being engaged in our country's future. Gap 1S. These interviews underscore the complex emotions and varied perspectives that characterized Donald Trump's inauguration. Gap 1S. From supporters to protesters, each voice adds depth to our understanding of this pivotal moment in U.S. history. Gap 1S. The personal stories and reflections of those who attended the inauguration highlight the impact of this day on individuals and the nation as a whole. Gap 1S. Reminding us of the deeply personal nature of political events. Gap 2S. Gap 2S. The inauguration of Donald Trump also had significant economic implications that rippled through the country and the world. Gap 1S. His presidency was marked by bold promises of economic growth, deregulation, and tax reform. Gap 1S. On the day of the inauguration, the stock market reacted with a mix of optimism and caution, reflecting the uncertainty and potential for change. Gap 1S. Trump's pledge to bring back manufacturing jobs and renegotiate trade deals like NAFTA sent waves through various industries. Gap 1S. Business leaders and investors were keenly aware that the new administration's policies could lead to both opportunities and challenges. Gap 1S. The immediate aftermath saw a surge in market confidence, dubbed the Trump bump, as investors anticipated pro-business policies. Gap 1S. However, there were also concerns about the potential for increased tariffs and trade wars, which could disrupt global supply chains and affect international relations. Gap 1S. Economists were divided, with some predicting robust economic growth, and others warning of the risks associated with protectionist policies. Gap 1S. The inauguration marked the beginning of a new economic era, one that would see significant shifts in policy and approach. Gap 1S. As we look back, it's clear that Trump's inauguration was not just a political event, but also a pivotal moment with far-reaching economic consequences. Gap 1S. In the years that followed, the economic landscape would be shaped by the administration's decisions, from tax cuts to trade negotiations. leaving a lasting impact on the US and global economies. Gap 1S. Understanding these economic implications helps us grasp the full significance of Donald Trump's inauguration and its place in history. Gap 2S. Gap 2S. 1 year after Donald Trump's inauguration, the legacy of that day began to crystallize. Gap 1S. The promises made during his speech echoed through his actions and policies, as America saw significant changes in areas like immigration, trade, and international relations. Gap 1S. The economic indicators told a mixed story. Some sectors thrived under deregulation and tax cuts, while others felt the strain of shifting trade policies and tariffs. Gap 1S. Public opinion remained sharply divided, with supporters lauding the administration's efforts to shake up the status quo, and critics highlighting the controversies and legal challenges that arose. Gap 1S. The media continued to play a crucial role, shaping narratives and influencing perceptions about the administration's successes and failures. Gap 1S. In the international arena, alliances were tested and new diplomatic dynamics emerged, reflecting the administration's America First stance. Gap 1S. The year also saw unprecedented levels of civic engagement, with both grassroots support and opposition movements gaining momentum. Gap 1S. Reflecting on the inauguration a year later, it became clear that the day was not just a ceremonial event, but a catalyst for profound and lasting change. Gap 1S. The impact of Donald Trump's inauguration continued to unfold, shaping the political, social, and economic landscape in ways that would be felt for years to come. Gap 2S. Gap 2S. The inauguration of Donald Trump as the 45th President of the United States had far-reaching consequences on the global political stage. Gap 1S. His America First policy marked a significant shift from previous administrations, prompting a re-evaluation of alliances and trade agreements. Gap 1S. Traditional allies like NATO members found themselves questioning the solidity of their partnerships, as Trump's rhetoric often called into question the value of long-standing alliances. Gap 1S. In Asia, countries like China and North Korea responded with a mix of caution and assertiveness, adjusting their strategies in response to the new U.S. administration's unpredictable approach. Gap 1S. The Middle East saw a recalibration of U.S. involvement, with significant policy changes regarding Israel, Iran, and Saudi Arabia. Gap 1S. European leaders grappled with the implications of Trump's stance on climate change, trade tariffs, and defense spending, which created ripples throughout the EU. Gap 1S. In Latin America, shifts in U.S. immigration and trade policies had direct impacts on economic stability and diplomatic relations. Gap 1S. The global response to Trump's inauguration underscored the interconnectedness of modern geopolitics, where changes in one nation's leadership can reverberate across the world. Gap 1S. As nations adapted to the new reality, the international political landscape continued to evolve, reflecting the profound impact of Trump's ascension to the presidency. Gap 2S. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more videos on politics, history, and all things related to U.S. presidential history.